These 8 chocolate brands sold across the UK are not as safe as you think. These brands are quietly doing things that would make you drop that chocolate bar immediately and go, "Wait, what?" I'm talking ingredients and shortcuts that can slowly affect your health over time, and most people have no idea it's happening. Issues linked to heart strain, metabolic problems, and long-term exposure, risks all hidden behind sweet flavours and familiar packaging. When I started noticing these patterns tied to everyday chocolate, I decided to investigate properly. What I uncovered was disturbing. In this video, I'm exposing 8 chocolate brands you should avoid and exactly why they raise serious concerns. Then I'll show you 3 chocolate brands that are actually doing things right, so you're not left guessing in the supermarket. And finally, I'll show you how to spot bad chocolate brands yourself, so you don't fall for the same tricks again. Stay until the end, because number 1 is a brand millions of people trust, and it's the most concerning of all. Bad brand 8, Lindt. Lindt is widely seen as a safer, more refined chocolate choice. In the UK, many people reach for it when they want something that feels premium, especially its dark chocolate ranges. The branding plays heavily into this trust. Swiss heritage, elegant packaging, and words like excellence and master chocolatier all signal quality and expertise. For most consumers, higher price and richer taste automatically mean a better product. The problem is that premium image doesn't tell the full story. In recent years, concerns have been raised about the presence of heavy metals such as lead and cadmium in certain dark chocolate products. These metals don't come from flavorings or sugar. They are linked to cocoa itself, specifically where and how it's grown, how the soil is treated, and how the beans are processed. Dark chocolate, particularly high cocoa varieties like the ones Lindt specializes in, tends to contain higher concentrations because cocoa solids are where these contaminants accumulate. What makes this concerning isn't immediate danger, it's long-term exposure. When people eat dark chocolate regularly, a square a day, a bar a week, small amounts can add up over time. Yet consumers are rarely told this. There are no warnings on the packaging, no guidance on how often these products should be eaten, and no clear explanation that healthier dark chocolate can come with hidden trade-offs. Health experts have linked prolonged exposure to cadmium with kidney damage, bone weakening, and increased strain on the cardiovascular system. Lead exposure, even at low levels, has been associated with heart health risks and developmental concerns, which is especially troubling for households with children. When a brand markets itself as a smarter, more responsible choice, that lack of transparency matters. Lindt may not be something you need to fear, but it is something you should think twice about, particularly if it's part of your regular routine rather than an occasional treat. And if this surprises you, the next brand is even more common in UK homes and raises concerns on a much larger scale. Bad brand 7, Ferrero. Ferrero products are everywhere in the UK, from Ferrero Rocher gift boxes to Kinder treats aimed at children. This brand family is deeply woven into everyday life. It's trusted, familiar, and often associated with celebrations, rewards, and family moments. Because it feels so normal, most people never stop to question it. That's exactly why it deserves closer scrutiny. Ferrero has faced repeated criticism over cocoa sourcing and transparency. Independent ethics and sustainability reviews have pointed out that the company provides limited clarity on where its cocoa comes from and how consistently its supply chain protects farmers and communities. When a brand operates at this scale, even small gaps in oversight can translate into serious, real-world consequences. Another issue is how these products are formulated. Many Ferrero chocolates rely heavily on sugar, palm oil, and ultra-processed ingredients, especially in lines marketed toward children. While the packaging focuses on fun, joy, and indulgence, the nutritional reality is far less comforting. These products are designed for frequent consumption, yet offer little nutritional value and contribute to long-term metabolic strain when eaten regularly. What concerns many critics most is the disconnect between branding and responsibility. Ferrero presents itself as a family-friendly company, but provides minimal front-facing information to help parents make informed decisions. There are no clear explanations about sourcing standards, no prominent commitments visible on packaging, and no guidance on moderation. Just glossy images and emotional marketing. For adults, this often leads to overconsumption without awareness. For children, it normalizes highly processed. Ferrero isn't just about one product or one ingredient. It's about scale, repetition, and trust. When a brand is this widely consumed, even modest issues become significant because they affect millions of people repeatedly, year after year. What makes the next brand harder to question is that many people grew up with it and never stopped trusting it. Bad brand 6. Mars. Mars products are woven into everyday life in the UK. Galaxy bars at the checkout, Maltesers in sharing bags, celebrations on coffee tables. These chocolates aren't framed as indulgences anymore. They've become routine, familiar, almost invisible. That familiarity is the problem. Mars operates at an enormous scale, and with that scale comes heavy reliance on industrial cocoa sourcing. Ethics and sustainability assessments have repeatedly criticized Mars for weak performance in responsible cocoa practices, especially when it comes to transparency and measurable outcomes. The company makes broad commitments, but clear evidence of impact is difficult to track from the outside. Then there's the formulation itself. Mars chocolates are built to be hyper-palatable. High sugar, refined fats, emulsifiers, and flavor enhancers engineered for repeat consumption. This isn't about an occasional treat, it's about products designed to be eaten frequently, quickly, and in larger quantities than people realize. Over time, that pattern matters. Diets high in added sugars and ultra-processed foods are linked to insulin resistance, weight gain, and increased cardiovascular strain. When chocolate becomes a normal snack instead of a rare indulgence, those risks quietly compound. What makes Mars especially concerning is how little friction there is between consumer and product. No warnings, no prompts to slow down, no meaningful context on sourcing or health trade-offs, just cheerful branding and constant availability. It's not that Mars chocolate is uniquely toxic, it's that it's everywhere, eaten often and trusted without question. When a product reaches that level of saturation, even moderate issues turn into large-scale problems. And that brings us to a brand with even deeper roots. One many people grew up with and still defend today. Bad brand 5. Cadbury. For many people in the UK, Cadbury isn't just another chocolate brand. It's tied to identity and memory. School lunchboxes, Easter eggs, Christmas tins, the unmistakable purple packaging. That emotional attachment runs deep, and it's one of the main reasons Cadbury still enjoys such widespread trust. But that trust is increasingly outdated. Over the past decade, a growing number of UK consumers have noticed that Cadbury chocolate simply isn't what it used to be. Complaints about texture, taste, and sweetness appear again and again in reviews and discussions. Words like waxy, overly sweet, and synthetic come up far more often than they once did. These aren't isolated opinions, they point to systematic changes in how the chocolate is made. Those changes largely stem from reformulation and cost optimization. Modern Cadbury bars rely more heavily on sugar, emulsifiers, and processed fats, while cocoa content and quality have taken a back seat. The goal isn't craftsmanship or balance, it's consistency, shelf life, and profit at scale. Chocolate becomes less about flavour and more about efficiency. There's also the issue of branding versus reality. Cadbury still leans heavily on its British heritage in marketing, using nostalgia to suggest tradition and care. But behind the scenes, production decisions reflect a multinational, volume-driven approach. For consumers, this creates a quiet mismatch. The story on the wrapper doesn't align with what's actually inside it. From a health perspective, the shift matters. Higher sugar concentration and ultra-processed formulations contribute to metabolic strain when eaten regularly, especially when these products are marketed as everyday snacks rather than occasional treats. What once felt like a small indulgence can quickly become a habitual source of excess sugar. What frustrates longtime buyers most isn't just the taste, it's the lack of transparency. The changes happen gradually, without clear communication, leaving people to realise only after years of buying out of habit. Cadbury isn't on this list because it's unfamiliar or extreme. It's here because so many people are still buying it based on what it used to represent, not what it has quietly become. And the next brand shows what happens when those quiet changes become impossible to ignore. Bad brand 4. Toblerone. Toblerone built its reputation on being different. The triangular shape, the Swiss imagery, the idea that this wasn't just another chocolate bar but something special. For years it was treated as a premium gift chocolate, something you brought back from airports or saved for occasions. That reputation has taken a serious hit. Over time, consumers began noticing visible changes. The chocolate tasted different, the texture felt cheaper, and in one of the most public missteps, the gaps between Toblerone's signature triangles were widened, a cost-cutting decision so obvious it sparked international backlash. What should have been a subtle internal change became a public symbol of shrinkflation and quality erosion, but the spacing controversy was only the surface issue. Behind it were broader changes tied to reformulation and manufacturing priorities. Toblerone products have increasingly leaned toward higher sugar ratios and more processed ingredient profiles, moving further away from the balance people associated with the brand's earlier years. For a chocolate marketed as premium, that shift matters. There's also the issue of expectations. When people pay more, they expect better ingredients, better sourcing, and better transparency. Instead, many consumers feel Toblerone delivers less while charging the same, or more. That gap between promise and reality damages trust far more than a cheaper bar ever could. From a health perspective, the changes push Toblerone firmly into the ultra-processed category. High sugar density combined with frequent consumption, especially during holidays when these bars are eaten quickly, contributes to spikes in blood sugar and unnecessary metabolic load. It's not catastrophic in isolation, but it's far from the treat with standards image the brand still projects. What makes Toblerone's case particularly telling is that people noticed. The changes weren't subtle enough to hide, and once trust cracks, it's difficult to repair, and that leads directly to the next brand, one that didn't just disappoint quietly but has been criticized for issues that go far beyond taste or portion size. Bad brand 3. Nestle. Nestle isn't just another chocolate brand, it's a giant that quietly dominates supermarket shelves. The UK, its chocolate products are so common that many people stop seeing them as a choice at all. Kit Kat, Aero, Milky Bar, Quality Street. They're bought out of habit, familiarity and routine. That level of normalization is exactly what shields Nestle from scrutiny. For years, Nestle has been criticized by consumer groups, watchdogs and ethics organizations over cocoa sourcing practices, including concerns about child labor risks and weak supply chain accountability. While the company regularly announces commitments and pledges, critics point out a consistent gap between promises and measurable outcomes. The language sounds reassuring, but the follow-through remains difficult to verify. On the product side, Nestle chocolates are built for maximum efficiency and mass appeal. High sugar content, refined fats, and heavy processing dominate most of the lineup. These chocolates are engineered to be soft, sweet, and instantly rewarding, not balanced or nutritionally meaningful. When eaten occasionally, the impact may seem small. When eaten regularly, as they often are, the effects add up. Diets high in ultra-processed foods and added sugars are associated with increased risks of type 2 diabetes, weight gain, and cardiovascular stress. Nestle's chocolate products are rarely framed as indulgences anymore. They're sold as everyday snacks, lunchbox fillers, and quick pick-me-ups. That framing quietly encourages overconsumption. What unsettles many critics most is how opaque the system remains. Consumers are asked to trust a global corporation with enormous influence, yet are given limited clarity about sourcing conditions, ingredient trade-offs, or long-term impacts. The burden of awareness falls entirely on the buyer. Nestle doesn't end up on this list because of a single scandal or one product. It's here because of scale, repetition, and unresolved concerns that have persisted for decades. When a company this large gets it wrong, even slightly, the consequences reach far beyond any one chocolate bar. And next, we'll look at a brand that many people already question, but still underestimate just how far the issues go. Bad brand 2. Hershey's. Hershey's chocolate has been steadily gaining ground in the UK, appearing in American candy sections, online retailers, and even some mainstream supermarkets. It's often picked up out of curiosity or nostalgia, something different from traditional British or European chocolate. Because it's sold alongside familiar brands, many people assume it meets the same quality expectations. That assumption is misleading. Hershey's products are widely criticised for being heavily processed and built around sugar rather than cocoa. Compared to European-style chocolate, Hershey's typically uses lower cocoa quality, more stabilizers, and flavor compounds designed to recreate a chocolate taste rather than showcase real cocoa depth. The result is a product that melts quickly, tastes intensely sweet, and encourages fast, repeated eating. This formulation matters more than people realize. Chocolate that's ultra-processed and sugar-forward is far easier to overconsume. You don't feel satisfied, so you keep reaching for more. Over time, this pattern contributes to blood sugar instability, insulin resistance, and metabolic strain, especially when these products become part of someone's regular snack routine, rather than an occasional novelty. There's also the issue of nutritional framing. Hershey's products are often marketed as fun, harmless treats, something you grab without thinking. But when chocolate lacks meaningful cocoa content and is dominated by sugar and refined fats, it behaves more like confectionery than food. That distinction is rarely made clear to consumers. Ethical concerns add another layer. Hershey's has repeatedly been grouped with other mass-market chocolate companies criticized for weak cocoa sourcing transparency and slow progress on supply chain reform. While public commitments are made, independent critics continue to point out gaps between what's promised and what's verifiably achieved. For a brand of this size, those gaps affect enormous numbers of people at every level of production. What makes Hershey's particularly tricky in the UK is perception. It doesn't carry the same scrutiny as long-established British brands, so people treat it casually, as a novelty import rather than something to question. But once it becomes familiar, it slips into everyday consumption, carrying all the same issues without the expectations of quality or responsibility. Hershey's isn't dangerous in isolation. The concern is regular exposure to a product engineered for overconsumption, paired with minimal transparency and low cocoa integrity. That combination is exactly what turns a harmless-looking treat into something worth avoiding. If this breakdown is already making you rethink what's in your chocolate, take a moment to like the video. It helps this information reach more people, and subscribe if you want more investigations like this, because the final brand isn't just a company, it's the system behind several of the ones you've already seen. There's one brand left and it ties everything together. Bad brand 1, Milka. This final brand isn't just another name on a wrapper. Milka is marketed as gentle, wholesome chocolate. Soft purple packaging, alpine imagery, and messaging built around smoothness and care all suggest a product that's comforting and safe. For many shoppers, Milka feels like a lighter, more innocent alternative to darker or harsher chocolate brands. Something you can eat without overthinking. That image is carefully constructed. Behind the branding, Milka operates as a mass-market chocolate produced at industrial scale. The chocolate itself is built far more around sugar, milk solids, and processed fats than cocoa quality. When you look past the front of the wrapper, cocoa plays a surprisingly small role, compared to what most people assume chocolate should be made of. This matters because formulation drives consumption. Chocolate that is soft, sweet, and low in cocoa is designed to be eaten quickly and in larger amounts. It doesn't satisfy. It encourages repeat bites. Over time, that pattern contributes to excess sugar intake and metabolic strain, especially when products like this are treated as everyday snacks rather than occasional treats. Another concern is transparency. Milka offers very little clear information about cocoa sourcing on its packaging. There are broad sustainability statements, but few specifics that allow consumers to understand where the cocoa comes from, how farmers are treated, or what safeguards are actually in place. That lack of detail isn't accidental. It keeps attention on imagery rather than process. Because Milka is owned and produced under a global corporate system, decisions around ingredients, sourcing and manufacturing are driven by efficiency and consistency, not craftsmanship. That's why Milka bars tend to taste uniform across regions and batches. Consistency sounds reassuring, but in food production, it often means heavy processing and aggressive cost control. What makes Milka especially concerning is how easy it is to underestimate. It doesn't look aggressive, it doesn't taste intense, it doesn't feel indulgent. That softness lowers people's guard, leading to more frequent consumption and less awareness of what they're actually eating. Milka earns the #1 spot, not because it's shocking, but because it's subtle. It's the kind of chocolate people eat often without thinking, trusting the branding rather than the ingredients. And that quiet normalization is exactly what makes it the most important brand on this list to reconsider. If there's one takeaway from this list, it's this. Sometimes the real problem isn't the chocolate you see, it's the company you don't. After looking at what goes wrong, it's only fair to show what gets it right. These next brands aren't perfect, but they stand out for doing the opposite of everything you've just seen. Clearer sourcing, simpler ingredients, and a willingness to be transparent even when it costs more. If you still want to enjoy chocolate without the same concerns, this is where to start. Recommended brand 1, Tony's Chocolonely. Tony's Chocolonely was created as a direct response to everything that's wrong with the mainstream chocolate industry. The brand doesn't just talk about ethics. It was built around exposing exploitation in cocoa supply chains and proving that chocolate doesn't have to be made that way. One of the biggest differences is transparency. Tony's clearly explains where its cocoa comes from, how farmers are paid, and what steps are taken to reduce exploitation. Instead of vague promises, the brand publishes sourcing information and openly acknowledges the challenges involved. That level of honesty is rare in an industry built on obscurity. Ingredient-wise, Tony's keeps things relatively simple. The focus is on cocoa, sugar, and cocoa butter, without relying heavily on artificial flavouring or unnecessary fillers. While it's still chocolate and should be enjoyed in moderation, it isn't engineered for mindless overconsumption in the same way mass-market bars are. Tony's also makes a point of accountability. When issues arise, including recalls or supply challenges, the company addresses them publicly rather than quietly burying them. That willingness to be visible builds trust in a way marketing never can. This isn't health food, and Tony's doesn't pretend it is. What it offers instead is clarity. You know what you're buying, where it comes from, and why it was made the way it was. And next, we'll look at a brand that takes a very different approach but shares the same commitment to doing chocolate the right way. Recommended brand 2, Divine Chocolate. Divine Chocolate stands out because of something most chocolate brands never offer: real ownership at the source. Unlike mass-market companies that talk about farmers, Divine is partly owned by the cocoa farmers themselves. That single fact changes how decisions are made from the ground up. This structure creates accountability that marketing campaigns can't fake. When farmers have a stake in the brand, there's a direct incentive to prioritize fair pay, safe working conditions, and long-term sustainability rather than squeezing costs at every stage. It also means profits don't just flow upward, they're shared with the people actually growing the cocoa. From an ingredient perspective, Divine keeps things straightforward. The chocolate focuses on cocoa quality rather than excessive sugar or artificial enhancers. You're not getting a product engineered for maximum sweetness or instant dopamine hits. You're getting chocolate that tastes like cocoa, not confectionery pretending to be cocoa. Divine is also known for clear labeling and certification. The brand doesn't rely on vague buzzwords or emotional imagery. Instead, it uses recognized standards and backs them up with visible practices. For consumers, that removes a lot of guesswork when standing in the supermarket aisle. Health-wise, no chocolate is a superfood, and Divine doesn't pretend otherwise. But by avoiding extreme processing and prioritizing cocoa integrity, it reduces many of the concerns seen in mass-produced bars. It's the difference between an occasional treat made with intention and a snack designed to disappear without thought. What really separates Divine is consistency. The brand doesn't position ethics as a trend or a marketing angle. It's embedded into how the business works. That makes it one of the more reliable options for people who want chocolate without supporting the same systems you've just seen. And finally, there's one more brand that approaches chocolate from a completely different angle, focusing on origin, simplicity, and control at every step. Recommended brand 3, Chocolate Madagascar. Chocolate Madagascar represents the opposite end of the chocolate spectrum from mass-market brands. Instead of sourcing cocoa from multiple anonymous suppliers, this brand works with a single origin: cocoa grown and processed entirely in Madagascar. That level of control dramatically reduces the unknowns that dominate industrial chocolate. This is what's known as bean-to-bar chocolate. It means the company oversees the entire process, from cocoa bean to finished bar. There are no long, opaque supply chains, no vague sourcing statements, no hidden handoffs between multiple contractors. What you buy is directly connected to where it was grown. Ingredient lists reflect that simplicity. Chocolate Madagascar bars typically contain very few ingredients: cocoa beans, cocoa butter, and sugar. No artificial flavorings, no unnecessary emulsifiers, no fillers designed to stretch profit margins. The result is chocolate that tastes distinct, rich, and intentional, rather than generically sweet. From a health perspective, this matters. Fewer ingredients and less processing mean fewer hidden trade-offs. While chocolate should always be enjoyed in moderation, products like this are far less likely to contribute to the overconsumption patterns seen with ultra-processed brands. You eat less, but you enjoy it more. There's also transparency. Chocolate Madagascar doesn't rely on emotional advertising or nostalgia. It lets origin, process, and quality speak for themselves. That honesty gives consumers confidence that what's on the label matches what's in the bar. This brand is a good reminder that chocolate doesn't have to be complicated or deceptive. When companies take responsibility for the entire process, many of the problems simply disappear. Now that you've seen which brands to avoid and which ones are doing things right, the most important skill isn't memorizing names. It's knowing how to spot bad chocolate for yourself. How to spot bad chocolate brands yourself. By now, you've seen how misleading chocolate branding can be. Familiar names, premium packaging, and nostalgic imagery don't guarantee quality, and they definitely don't guarantee transparency. The good news is you don't need to memorize brand lists forever. Once you know what to look for, bad chocolate becomes much easier to spot. Start with the ingredient list. If sugar is the first ingredient, that's your first red flag. Chocolate should be built around cocoa, not sweetness. The longer the ingredient list, the more likely the product has been engineered for cost and shelf life rather than quality. Watch for vague terms like vegetable fats, flavorings, or emulsifiers that don't clearly explain what you're consuming. Next, be cautious of health halos. Words like dark, premium, artisan, or finest don't mean much on their own. Dark chocolate can still be overloaded with sugar or sourced poorly. Premium looking. Packaging often exists to distract from what's actually inside the bar. Always check the label, front but the back. Pay attention to how the brand talks about sourcing. Responsible companies explain where their cocoa comes from and how farmers are treated. Bad brands rely on vague promises and glossy language without specifics. If you can't find clear information with a quick search, that silence usually tells you enough. Another key sign is how the chocolate makes you eat it. Ultra-processed chocolate is designed to disappear quickly, leaving you unsatisfied and reaching for more. Higher quality chocolate tends to be richer, more filling, and naturally self-limiting. If you always feel like one bar turns into 3, that's not an accident, it's design. Finally, remember this: brands change, ownership changes, recipes change. The safest habit isn't loyalty, it's awareness. And chocolate should be an intentional treat, not something you consume on autopilot. If this video helped you rethink what's really in your chocolate, hit the like button, subscribe. It helps this information reach more people who need to see it. Feel free to share this video with friends or family, especially anyone who still thinks chocolate is always harmless. Thanks for watching.